Hi, this is William Parris. Welcome to another episode of Legitimate Matters. This is an episode that you don't want to miss. The topic is the N word, words in language. It's so compelling. Unfortunately, I do have to say that we ran into some technical difficulties, but nevertheless, you must pay attention to the conversation. It's compelling, and regardless of race, there's something in this episode for you. I am so excited about my three guests on the show today. My first guest is Dr. Neil Lester. Dr. Neil Lester is Foundation Professor of English and Founding Director and Dean of Humanities at Arizona State University. In 2008, he taught the first ever college level class design to explore the N word. My next guest is Amanda Watson, who received a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Arts from Marymount Manhattan College and a Master's of Science in Media Management from the New School. As a media professional, she has interned and worked behind the scenes in the entertainment industry for 11 years. My next guest, Michael Penson, also known as Sir Mike, is a gentleman by nature and a protector on instinct. Michael has trained several different types of canines for obedience and protection, now adding detection and patrol to his canine handling skills. Gentlemen, ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for
Thank
having
you.
How's
us.
everybody doing? Amanda, you doing good?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here with you guys. This is exciting.
Well, we know that the conversation today is about that N word. And I got to tell you guys, as I was mentioning in the introduction, when I hear the word, and no matter who says it, it just has an effect on me. I kind of cringe a little bit. And I'm even more amazed when I'm walking down the street and I might see a black person and a Hispanic person hanging out, and both of them are referring to each other. And the part that kind of throws me off is that they're very comfortable using the word, even regardless of who's around. They seem to be very insensitive to whoever might be in the perimeter. So I want to ask both Amanda and Michael, just if you could give me just one sentence, what does that word mean to you? Amanda, I'm going to ask you first. What does that word pertain to? How do you relate to that word?
Well, for me, I think it's twofold because I know there's nigger, which is Nigger, and then there's nigga, which is Nigga. I use the latter, so I use nigga. And for me, if I had to couple it down into one sentence, it would be endearment, a term of endearment. So I'm from the school of JayZ, so that's how I kind of group it.
I don't know why, but JayZ seems to come up a lot in term when someone wants to make reference. I guess is that because JayZ is uses it so often in his lyrics?
He actually had the same conversation with Oprah on her show.
I know.
And and he so I think that's a point of reference, like the main point of reference.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they agreed. I remember they agreed to disagree on
Yeah.
that one.
Hmm.
What about you, Michael? What do you think?
Uh, if you can hear me, I'm just gonna say it like this. I think it's more culture,
Hmm.
especially when you see the Hispanics and the Black Americans talk that lingo. I grew up in that environment you just spoke about, and that was a part of us, And that's for me, it's a relationship, as a friend, as a brother. It was just common to speak in a good way in that fashion, and that's why the word the N word it's a twofold as well. Just like the young lady said before, it's just how I portrayed it has always been a more positive way. versus on the negative side.
So both of you see it as it's a positive. Amanda said a term of endearment. Michael, I heard you say it's a part of culture, and you relate to the word as a word that reflects positivity. Is that what I understand when you're communicating with your a friend, someone
Yeah,
who's in
friends,
your
you
circle?
communicating with peers, and you're rapping and talking. It's just what goes into what our environment is. That's our
Okay.
environment. That's what we used to: music, TV. That's what we hear. Is what we see. And the generations come a long time has made it sound great to use. So guess what?
So
We
let
use it.
me so okay, so let me ask both of you. So it's so you're obviously you're very comfortable with it. It's a term of endearment. It's like, hey, what's up, bro? How you doing? Good to see you. My N word. Yo, what's up, my N
Exactly.
word?
Exactly.
I hear it all the time. But when you do say it, do you ever make reference uh to the, I won't say the origins, but do you make any connection, or does it ever cross your mind about any relation to oppression, or does that ever cross your mind at all?
For me, no, because like I said previously, the word nigger for me, that's for me related to oppression. So when it becomes nigga, it already changed its power. Like we took the power back where we turned it into a term of endearment. It's in our culture. So it's two different things for me. I know where it's coming from, and the intent behind where it's coming from. It's very vile, it's very disgusting, it's very degrading, and it was meant to harm us physically and mentally. But I feel like in my generation and before, we kind of took that power back. So nigga is what we use.
Dr. Lester, I want to bring this into your camp right now. You've done a lot of research on this. You've taught it in you have a course. As a matter of fact, the only um, course in the United States that teaches or has um, a course that talks about this particular word as it relates to language. But I've read quite a bit of your work and some of your quotes, and you understand what it meant to people who were enslaved. Can you give us? I would like a real visual of what that word might have meant to people who were enslaved, or even post emancipation, because at the time of the emancipation, um, blacks were still being lynched, castrated, lynched. Can you help us to be able to see that in our minds from your perspective?
Thank you. I certainly respect the positions that are offered here, which seem to be intersecting. But I can tell you, when I created this course, it came because at the time Senator Obama was running for president, and I saw that word proliferating in social media around him.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when he was elected president, I saw it there too. What was interesting to me, though, is I created this course so that I would better understand the word. It's not a word that I've surrounded myself with. It's not a word that I use personally. But I wanted to understand sort of the dynamics of this generationally, but also linguistically. And the history, as I understand it, and I know Kendrick Lamar has a theory about it coming from Negus, which means kings. I'm always wondering, when you talk about kings, where are the queens and the children? Because that word is an equal opportunity epithet. The history that makes sense to me is the history of the 1500s, when the Europeans, Portuguese and Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
encountered Africans and then named them as Negro. Black became all these sort of negative assumptions that we still have with Black today, as criminal, uneducated, not very attractive. All of those things became Black. So by 1619, it was clearly a disparaging name for an other. And that has persisted. And so, one of the things that's interesting to me when I was teaching the class and sort of trying to look at the history of the word is that it was the way in which the word permeated all of these aspects of culture. So it wasn't just the word itself, it was what the word signifies. And it was often violence, but it was also representation. So that's when we had the minstrel tradition with the black face and the red lips. And so that's how I've sort of looked at this, all in, products, cleaners and cigarettes and not cigarettes, cigars, and all of those kinds of things had that word in it. Things for the hair, N-word hair. And so it became to me a way of looking at history through the lens of language that was tricky, because just as Amanda pointed out, there is a way in which it's believed that the sounds of the word can determine what it means. In this instance, my research showed that even then, that it was spelled with the GA and the GAH, and it was really about pronunciation. And I was always curious about the gymnastics that one has to go through to make sure that you're hearing it correctly. What you are hearing consistently, no matter how it's spelled, is the root of the word, the NIG. And that's how it has created a certain theme for me, not in terms of trying to tell people what they can and can't say, but for me determining what I am controlling that's coming out of my mouth and what I want to surround myself with.
Thank you for that, because even leading up to this, doing this show, I did my own research, of course, to understand, the origins, but even at one particular point after the emancipation, that N word was used on blacks when they would take them or literally kidnap them from their homes and burn them alive, for things like voting. Okay, so that was voter oppression. Actually, was something that the whites did not want blacks to participate in, and that was because that word to the whites signified that blacks were not even human. They couldn't vote. They were not human. They were less than human. And so when they took a life and brutally murdered blacks, whether it was the lynching or whether it was burning them alive, castrating the men, raping the women, okay, these are the things that they felt. They did this with liberty. And to me personally, that type of inhumane brutality is what I personally feel is associated with that word. Nevertheless, I also recognize that it is a part of the culture. So even though I feel this way, I still respect how you feel, Amanda, and certainly, your comments, Michael, as well. So one of the things that I pointed out, and this is certainly for our viewers, is that this is not a debate of whether it's right or wrong. This, for me, is to help us understand and appreciate language, a word, the power of the word, and how, depending upon how it's used, can affect the person who is on the receiving end of that word. But there's so much more for us to cover. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to dive a little deeper into this word. So viewers, I know you're probably glued to the TV, but you stay there, because when we come back from break, we're going to take it even further. Thanks for watching. We'll be right back. See you on the other side.
If I use the N-word, it could quite possibly, and honestly probably should, cost me my career. And I don't understand why, when we know how divisive this word is, why we would not have people like you, Trinidad, who are but you're a community, people look up to you, young people look up to you, and you're rapping about the word and making money on it, and they think they should be rapping the word and saying the word as well.
Hold on for 1 second, Mark. You can get in after him. Let Trinidad respond.
Ben, you see, you keep giving, you're giving the word too much power. I am making money off of doing music.
I'm not using it. You are.
I am making money off of doing music and being creative, sir.
to see race. Love is love.
Something I've noticed is there's no N-word equivalent for white people. There's cracker, Kremlin, gooba, gringo, moon cricket, honky, Elvis, and my personal favorite, OJ hunters. The only thing you can call white people to really hurt their feelings is racist. They hate that word. I mean, it really hurts their feelings. Like, I've been called the N-word. You call a white person a racist, they lose their minds. Yeah, I thought that'd get white noise. Okay, that's my time.
Welcome back to the show. We're here talking with my guests, Dr. Neil Lester, Amanda Watson, and Michael Penson about that word, about that N-word. And we left off talking about the evolution of the word and how it's used in our culture. But I want to jump back to Dr. Lester and ask, considering, the vulgarity of the word, as both Amanda and Michael mentioned, it's common in the hip hop world. But how did we go from what you described in the last segment, when we're talking about the disparities and the brutality? When did that translate into, and now it's a part of lyrics in a song? I guess the question is, when the disconnect?
Well, I actually missed that memo that went out when it told people that we had taken it back and it became a term of endearment. I certainly recognized when this happened with NWA and in the 80s hip hop world. But what was missing from that memo, however, is that I couldn't quite reconcile that with what preceded it. And it was interesting to me, as one who teaches students who are younger than I, was that there seemed to be a disconnect, or at least an unawareness of, or not an acknowledgement of, the fact that the violence, the disparaging, the negativity is still connected with folks today. So I can certainly understand its popularity. I mean, we could look at that through the lens of Du Bois and Souls of Black Folks when he talks about double consciousness. We can also look at that through the lens of hypermasculinity, because it does seem to be somewhat gendered in its use. If we're going to talk about, what's up my, there's a whole choreography that goes with that. And even the what's up my could actually be connected back to Julian Curry, a spoken word artist, who says something about, when they were building Wall Streets, those enslaved would have the masters walk up and say, "What's up, my?" So even that in and of itself was a certain kind of choreography that was both gendered and raced. And what was missing in that memo is I rarely hear people able to give me anything else except to say that it's a term of endearment. And I'm like, well, if it's like friend and if it's like brother, then what's wrong with those words? What's wrong with those words? And so that's just been the question. Again, not to tell anybody how to think, but it's the stuff that I ponder, because I can think of ways in which I would never walk up to somebody that I cared about and call them that. And it does seem to be, as I said, something gendered that's potentially associated with a certain kind of masculinist identity. And I'll just remind you this to show how it goes back between this past and present. Those who were enslaved would sit around, after they'd done their work, and if they weren't beaten, would sort of compare who had the best master. That's a very telling and profoundly problematic experience when those who are enslaved or trying to compare who has the better master. And we engage in that when we talk about how slaves and feel slaves. At the end of the day, you're still a slave and you're not in control of yourself. So that's what I'm saying. This brings up when I created that class, it was not just about those 6 letters, it was about all the signifiers that go with that. And that's what that became. When that memo went out, I can hear people say it's a term endearment, it's a term endearment, but I want something else though. I feel like I want something else on the menu. Because if I pull this a la carte, all I'm getting is the same stuff. Those who got it got that memo. I didn't get it. And I'll say also, you talk about the popularity of it. A song is never about that word. It's about a whole lot of other stuff. So I wonder if the sexism, if the homophobia, if the misogyny is also being absorbed in a kind of endearing way. Because many of those songs do embody that.
Wow. That's a really good point. So it's almost like you're using once again the power of the words and taking words that we would consider to be insulting and disrespectful and twisting it to the point where it becomes acceptable. Because the point is, to your point, Dr. Lester, if you have lyrics in a song and the lyrics refer to women as the B word, and they're talking about things that even describe or refer to women almost as if they're objects in the lyrics. I think it's really pretty similar, but it seems to be widely accepted. But I want to kind of throw this back. I want to direct something over at Michael. Michael, let me ask you a question. So when we first opened the show and I asked you what that word meant, one of the things you said was it was culture. Your response was slightly different than Amanda's. Amanda said a term of endearment, but she made reference to knowing the origins of the word or understanding that it was connected with that it was connected with brutality to some degree. Your response was it was a part of the culture. It was what you knew. And I didn't hear any connection to what we're talking about in terms of the brutality. So are you disconnected with how that word was used historically, or you're aware of it, but you don't feel that it's relevant? How do you feel?
Actually, to be honest with you, I really understand the fact of the N word, and even though I just named culture, it was just one thing to my understanding on how I grew up with it. Now, I think it's definitely a derogatory word. It's like a cuss word, in a whole lot of sense when it comes down to saying the word, and then to know that automatically I feel offended when the Caucasian said, even indirectly or directly towards me, it's just kind of like you calling me a boy in a sense. So if you want to take it back, I mean, there's some words that click, that especially when you're coming from the South, you hear certain things in dialogue that, you can say the white man or Caucasian has just made mention, and it has gotten under my skin without having to watch or read any movies. It was just like an automatic thing because you could feel their energy when they say it, and that then was an understanding of the word itself. Now, how you say it, that's where the problem has become, and using it frequently just on GP. And I'll give you just a slight scenario. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I made mention of it because I got upset about something she did, but she's a teenager, so I didn't look at it that way. And of course, she's a girl, but then it just came out of my mouth, just like I was talking to my homeboy, but I had an attitude with it. So guess what? It totally changed the outcome of what I was saying using the N word. So that right there took the cake, and I was like, you know what? This is very, very powerful, and for this to come out the way it's coming out, and then you have Doc letting us know these are the origins of. And I looked through the origins, I noticed it, and I was like, yep, I can see now how it came about and how it happened, and how we use it, and it's just like freely. Like, we have no care of our culture. We really don't have no care of ourselves, and our language, like the teachings on how we use our words, is really, really short. So guess what? We use a lot of how would I put this? A lot of creative words to to make ourselves feel good using these things, and we got to get up. We got to get there. You know, we got to get back to where we were supposed to be, and it's a lack of education for the most part. But that's guess what?
Wow.
That's our environment. We have been placed in this environment. This is what we get. When you go to a different side of town, you ain't hearing that. Number one, it ain't in schools like that. Number one, it's going. If it is, it's getting corrected out top. Out top, it's getting corrected. Your uncles and aunties ain't correcting you, ain't correcting us. It's just like an everyday life. This is our lifestyle. This is us. This is who we are. Which, in a sense, on one side it is, and the other side is not. It's definitely how you use it. So that's where I come from when it comes down to the N word. Do I like it? No, I don't. I don't like it. You know, number one, where it came from, and my last name being Pinton. I know I'm a Spanish descendant, some type of Cuban descendant. So it really to understand, like, wow. Now, you know, like Doc had made mention, and I'll keep it brief. You really said something when you made mention of the fact that when you use it, when you use this specific word and how you use it, it depends on how you take on it. But because of a person that of new generation, not gonna really understand it unless they understand the origin. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you.
That was
Thank
powerful.
you very much for that. Yeah,
It really was.
and I'm loving how this conversation is flowing because I was going to actually go there with you, Michael. You actually beat me to it because I seriously, I'm not kidding. One of the questions that I was going to ask was, you know, the age of your children and whether and how you would feel if one of your children, you turned around, you're having a conversation, the next thing that word comes out, from your 13-year-old daughter. I was wondering, would you suddenly turn around and be surprised, or would it be acceptable? I was going to go there.
Yeah, I would. I'm gonna say it like this. I'm gonna be surprised. This is what really shocked me though. 13, 7-year-old, and my 2-year-old, they all have a mindset of not using the word, and if they hear it, it's like, oh, that's a bad word. I'm like, thank you. I'm glad you understand it as a child. And then as parents, guess what we can't do? We can't react to what they're learning, and all of a sudden it becomes broken. And with that said, once I noticed that I had did it, just to bring that back up, it did something to me, and I understood what the kids are going through nowadays, and it's just going to be like trash. They're not going to care. But if you put it in them to understand where it came from, understand how it was used, so don't use it. I think they understand.
Can I just add one little thing to that? Because that's really powerful, Michael. And thank you, because I'm really not here to try to convince anybody of anything. I'm just sharing my journey through this. But I can tell you, I kind of flinched a little bit when Amanda said it. I flinched. And I
understand what you're saying.
I flinched. And part of that is because we didn't establish any ground rules about whether or not we were going to use it on the show. In other interviews I've had, people say, well, what are the ground rules? And I can totally understand why people would use it. But I also lost track of some of what was said because I was still trying to adjust to the fact that I had heard it. But it also reminded me that there are lawsuits now. One at Alabama State of a black on black lawsuit where a black person walked up to another black person and said, how you doing, my thinking that because we look the same or similarly that I can use that, and it was in the court. And that's not the first.
About that.
That is not the first time. So and in my office, when somebody comes in, one of my black friends comes in and uses it, there's a visceral response to it. And I can't even explain that. I think Sherry Shepard said this on The View years and years ago, that there's something about that word for some of us that just has a visceral response, especially if it comes from somebody who doesn't look like us. But the reality is that, people try to contend that there's a double standard. There really isn't a double standard because black folks don't agree on the use of that word. NAACP tried to bury it. They've got all these no N-word campaigns. We tried to get it out of the dictionary.
I was just about to go there with you about this dictionary thing. And I was like, I mean, one time I would have to be 14, 15. I looked in the dictionary and I saw the word. I looked it up and it said something about being idiot, ignorant. I'm like, oh, this is who we are? Wait a minute. So
Well,
now I
But
knew how to use the word.
yeah.
Amanda?
I feel like in my opinion, I am from the Bronx, and I don't believe that Black people are monolithic. But I did grow up in a culture. I grew up in the birthplace of hip hop, essentially, right? So I grew up in a culture where it was used freely, and I told you guys this before. I'm first generation American, so was it used in my Jamaican household? No, because they're coming from a culture and a place where they're the majority, so they don't have the same experience as Black Americans. But growing up as a first generation American, I use it freely because I am for hip hop is more than music to me. Hip hop is a culture, and that's how I was raised. That's how it was embedded in me. So I use it freely, not subscribing to what the initial intent was, but subscribing to how I use it between my friends. So if I hear my friends say nigga to me, I don't see it as a bad thing. It's just conversational. Now, will they say it frequently? Probably not, because I have a name, Amanda. But at the same time,
See?
if it comes up, I don't cringe the way some people may because of different experiences. And it also changed because when I was in high school, I may have used it more. I went on to college. I went to a predominantly white college, you can say, and my friends weren't really around. I didn't use it, and then I started going into work settings where I definitely didn't use it. So as I got older, it became less in my vocabulary. But if it isn't a lyric, if it isn't a JayZ lyric, you know what I mean? Like, I will say it, and I feel comfortable saying it. However, I think it's for Black people. We weren't the oppressors, we were the oppressed. So it's for us to take that word and to use it how we want to use it, whether we want to change the ending or whatever. Because I say ninja too, just for the simple fact that some people don't want to hear the other options. You know what I mean? But ninja is coming from the same place. You know, so at the same time, I feel like it's for Black people to own that. Yes, I grew up in a Dominican neighborhood as well, so Hispanics may use it, Indians may use it, people of color may use it. My only thing with that is, if they're going to use it, then when it comes to being Black and saying that they're Black, then say you're Black. Don't subscribe to using the word, taking our swag, taking our culture, but then you don't want to be identified as Black. So
that's the origin, right?
It's for Black people to use, and it is not for white people to use, but people of color may use it, in my opinion, if they understand it.
I'm going to have to jump in right here because we need to go to break. But I'm going to tell you, I am loving this conversation.
This is juicy.
This is a good one.
Right.
Oh, I am loving this.
This is good. I am appreciating this like on so many levels. So thank you both. All right. Okay. Hurry up with that break. Come back.
Listen, viewers, we have to take a break. I hope you are loving this conversation as much as we are. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll see you on the other side.
Honestly, it's pretty easy what you can and cannot say, you know? Like, you can't say what Roseanne said on Twitter. I'm not going to repeat it. You can't say that, you know? You can't say the M word. That's obvious, you know? Just some white people won't let that word go. They just won't let it go, you know? Why can't we say it? It's just a word. Can we say it? They be looking at me like I know the answer and shit. Gary, why can't we say it? I don't know, that's the rules. Yo, that'd be crazy if Black people change the rules one day. Just Black people come out, all right, we don't give a shit, you can say it now. You'd have white guys walking around, hear the news. Yeah. Black people said we're allowed to say the N-word, we're clear, we're good, we're allowed to say it. Are you fucking shitting me right now? Nah, we're approved, we're allowed, we can say it. We'll say it. Fuck that, you say it first.
I don't know anyone who understands the power of words more than Maya Angelou. I've been in her home at a party, someone telling a homophobic joke or making fun of someone in a derogatory way, and watched her invite them to leave or stop them in mid-sentence and say, "Not in my house, you won't."
Words are things, I'm convinced. You must be careful about the words you use, or the words you allow to be used in your house. In the Old Testament, we are told in Genesis that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. That's in Genesis. Words are things. You must be careful. Careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that. Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. I think they get on the walls. They get in your wallpaper. They get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally into you.
Welcome back to Legitimate Matters. I'm your host, William Parris, having a great conversation with my guests, Dr. Neil Lester, Amanda Watson, and Michael Penson. I believe that we are on a roll. We left the last segment with Amanda just, blowing it up. So Dr. Lester, I'm going to hand it back. I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond.
Right. What is gratifying is to hear this awareness of history, and I never assumed that those who were using it didn't have. What I also want to be mindful of, though, is that history is also the present, and that because racism exists today, that word is as powerful as it has always been. And I can tell you, the very first time that I had that word used on me was actually within the last 5 years at an outreach where a young Black man was upset that I was asking him to follow the rules. And he came at me with that. And I was listening to make sure that I heard the ending. And I thought, that's kind of ridiculous if I have to listen. I know what his intent was. 2 weeks later, I saw 2 young Black men fighting each other, kicking each other in the teeth, and they were calling each other that. I also have, some receipts about Black young men calling white people that when they were upset with them. There's one about a white officer stopping him for speeding, and he's calling him that. So it's way more complicated for me when I'm listening to this and trying to understand the ways in which I study language, so I know Black people can change language. We can change, bad so that it's good. We can change fat, change the spelling of it. We do all kinds of gymnastics. This is about identity, though, and identity of how we are represented and treated in this country and killed in the streets. You don't have to say it. You have to look at how people are treated, because I can guarantee you that word is following Kamala Harris just the way it followed Obama. So the past is the present.
Right. I want to interject in that if I can. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm sorry. Let me know if I'm.
Go, Michael. Go.
When you look at the way you put it, it sounds like it comes with a spirit. It sounds like because we can change if we want to change, but it sounds like there's an attachment to what we're dealing with, and with that attachment, and it's like you said, depending on how you say this word, it makes it derogatory. It makes it go somewhere they shouldn't. And you got kids that are calling white folks, the N word. That to me goes back to what was in the dictionary. So yeah, if you step out of line, you're an idiot. You're somebody that don't know something. Then yeah, you the N word, because it's just like any other cuss word. It has a defined meaning to it. So, but then and for a sense of it's like this. How do other females call each other bees? So it's almost like the same stuff. Like to me, that's why I say it seems like it's a spirit, because you can call me a bee, it's okay. What? You call me a what? For what? Oh, so really, you must be acting is. You see what I'm saying? So you acting as what you are, what you're saying is what you want. So it's got to be some attached to it for you to act the way you act. We even call in that matter.
But keep in mind also, though, it really isn't like the B word, though, because the B
Yeah.
word is associated to gender. The N word, nobody's going to call a baby. Nobody's going to call a baby or an infant a B word. In fact, there's a restaurant in Seattle called Biscuit Bee. Now, you wouldn't have that for the N word. You also wouldn't have a children's book about the B word like we've got right here. This is, and look at the menstrual tradition that's associated with that. So, there's even the F word that's associated with sexuality. So this is an equal opportunity epithet. So that if somebody is white who has a relationship of any sort with black folks, they could be an N-word lover. So there are ways in which this word really isn't like those other words because it is an equal opportunity epithet. We've got a word called the R word for people who are poor, and they're white. We call them this, but that's about economics. So if we start thinking about this word, we can't really put it in that same bowl that we put all the other words in. And if the past is the present and I walk down the street and step out of line, I could be called that. It has nothing to do with my degrees. It has nothing to do with where I work, what my income is. That's what I'm saying about the equal opportunity. And we don't always know those relationships because you can't look at somebody and tell what your relationship is. I can't, that's what I said. I flinched a little bit. I'm very fond. I don't even know you, but I know you. And so there's a way in which that word has a certain way of hitting us. And if we have to listen to how it's spelled, then that to me suggests a whole level of something else that's not just about black folks using the word.
That depends on which way we go with the fight.
Right.
Just saying.
I think. Oh, sorry. I don't mean to.
I just want to say that when Amanda used the word in the beginning, like you, Dr. Lester, I said, she said the word. She said the word. She said it.
She went there, right?
She said it. But she used it in her explanation as part of her explanation in terms of the spelling. So it fit. It worked.
But it didn't stop the impact, though. And I'm thinking of those cases because you can talk about what your intentions are, but you can't choreograph your impact. And I can tell you because I deal with teachers too. Teachers are using this in the classroom, and sometimes they are not saying it, but they're spelling it. And the black student in that class is still bothered by it. So that's what I'm saying is that we can't always look at people's intent. We certainly interpret it, but you know what the impact has been because you can't plan your impact.
I agree with you because when I hear the word, I kid you not, I literally have it. I can feel it. It literally has it affects my body. Okay, when I hear it. So here's my question though. Let's put ourselves or anyone in an environment where you're in a university, a college, a corporate environment. And I have seen, let me give you an example. In a corporate environment that I was working in last year, there was an elderly white woman that worked in another department. And her area was not where I worked, but she came in to where I was. And she came in and she was really bothered. And she was probably a little uncomfortable when she realized I was standing there, but she was speaking to a colleague who happened to be a white woman. And she was bothered because she heard two people in her area talking to each other and using the word. And she was so bothered that she came and had to talk about it. She was so uncomfortable that she needed to tell someone. Okay, so here's the question. If I once was on a bus, I was on a bus one time and someone wrote on the back seat of a bus, ends are ends because that's what they call each other. So my thing is that, we use the word so freely, speaking in general, we'll use it on the street, we'll talk to each other that way. And I understand what you're saying, Amanda. I understand what you expressed, Michael, in terms of, well, if they say it, well, it means something different. But then the question becomes, is there a book? Who wrote that rule? So, so you call each other that or people call each other that and then get offended, okay, when someone else says it. But even though they know, they struggle with why they can't use the word if you consider yourself to be that. Now, I know that when they use the word, they are spewing that word as an insult, but you kind of, if you're using the word freely, even though, Amanda, you explained it very, very well, but that's inside your head.
Yeah, but for me, I don't get offended by what people choose to call me to make me feel bad. And I don't know if that's due to personality. I don't know if that's of my experience of being first generation American and having, Jamaican heritage, where, when I talked to my mom, she said that they learned of their history, not of just the slavery in Jamaica, but they learn of their heroes, whether it was Marcus Garvey, they know the full spread. So for them, I don't know if you guys know, but Jamaicans are very prideful. And it's just another sense of identity, where I'm not trying to put Black Americans down or anything like that. I am American as my nationality, but at the same time, I don't succumb to what people say that I am. Now, if I'm going to take it a bit deeper, my parents named me Amanda. My middle name is Sasha Smith. But even the Smith is not mine. And I'm sitting here with Amanda Watson. The Watson is not mine. But I walk around with it every single day like I don't know where it came from. You get what I'm saying? So
That's real.
It's
That's real.
a slave plantation owner name, but I have to take that name and go to a job. I have to take that name and identify myself with it in the world. So when I watch and I look into Malcolm X, I understand why, and it hit me in a different way. I understand why he turned to X. You grow up hearing that, but then you understand, like, it's not ours. And if you want to make it yours, then you have to make it yours. That's it.
Wow.
That's powerful.
It's really very powerful. You guys are just, you guys are great. Dr. Lester, you teach this, and in your course, I'm assuming you have Black and white students.
Well, I'm at a PWI, so I rarely have all Black students.
Okay.
So yes, to answer your question, yes.
Okay.
I'm lucky if I get one or two students who look like me. Yes.
Wow.
Okay. So having said that, tell us one or two things that they have shared about their feeling about this word that might surprise us or not.
I don't know that it would surprise you. There's one story that I remember when I taught it early on, and it was a Latinx student who was saying that his buddies call him that, and they are not Black, and it made him feel bad. And I said, well, why didn't you stop it? And he said, well, I didn't know how, because I didn't want them to think I was uncomfortable, even though I was. I can tell you that in my class now, which is an African American literature class with 23 students in it, and probably 5 are of color, one of the white students said it in the first day of class, and I just stopped and said, okay, here's what the ground rules are. We are not going to say that in this class. All right. Then somebody else did it later and wrote it as a quote. And I said, we're not going to write it in the chat. You can write it in your paper. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's a way in which I don't know that I discovered anything new. What I discovered is that if you do like a Google search on Nigga, Nigger, Nigga, all of those Google things will show you something negative and how that word is being used. And I go back to Toni Morrison when she says definitions belong to the definers, not to the defined. Definitions belong to the definers, not to the defined. And I still, even in the examples that you offered, Amanda, there's still something gendered about that. There's still something about boys and men using it that we haven't quite looked at the extent to which that plays out. And we Black folks, myself included, we uphold white supremacy also. So whether it's sexism, ableism, classism, homophobia, that word is wrapped up in white supremacy. And if we're all into racial justice and we're all into anti-blackness, then we need to make that word part of that conversation.
Yeah.
Because we are complicit. We
I
are
was wondering about
complicit.
that. Yeah. And I was
We are
wondering, like,
definitely
how we get called that, or that word sticks out, but then, I mean, you kind of talk about between, especially what's going on now, blacks and whites, something that's never stopped. But then you say cracker is like, oh.
Well, but part of that is because that goes again how the word is not like any other word. We think that's funny, but I'm thinking of Richard Pryor, who and even Malcolm X, who changed their minds about using that word once they had their sort of evolution.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying is that we can evolve also. What I have seen that was really disturbing is a young student, high school student. I was doing a talk, and after this talk, he came up and he was shaking. And I thought, well, what's going on? And he said, I've been using that word so much I can't even stop saying it. And it was almost like his friends rallied around him and said, but you can't. He said, but that's all I've heard, though. And I keep saying, well, but that's how we learn stuff. You also unlearn stuff by doing the repetitions. And keep in mind that the consumers of hip hop, that audience is not necessarily people who look like us. That demographic consuming hip hop is of my students who come out of the parking lot with their BMWs and their parents' Teslas. Man. So you gotta put all that in the context of, and trust me, JayZ is benefiting from this. And he claimed that when Blue Ivy was born, he was going to stop using the B word. And I kept saying, well, why can't he take that and recognize that Blue Ivy could be called that too? And think about that use. So that's all I'm saying is that he's got a lot of checks coming out of that. Sexism, racism, homophobia, all those things persist because somebody profits from them. And that's what we talk about when we live in a capitalist society that is clearly perpetuating white supremacy. And I'm just asking people to think about it. So when I use it and I say straight talk about the N-word, and I have somebody saying, well, how can that be straight talk if you're not using it? I say, because I'm trying to control what comes out of my mouth. What comes out of yours is your business, but I can also control the extent to which I surround myself. And I do the same thing with cuss words. I got grown kids. And if it comes out, I was like, please don't use that. I don't use it with you. Please don't use it around me.
I have a question for the panel as we're running out of time, but I want everyone to have a final word. But before we, in the show, one of the questions that I have is about the racial tension in America now. And considering where we are, we're approaching an election. I think that, the racial tension has always been there, but it's been, as they say, on the low. But now it's just out there. It's in your face. Okay. But now, that being said, does it make us, should that be a reason to rethink the use of the word? And I'm going to throw that at you, Michael, because one question that I have for you in terms of just like as we wrap up the show, as you've heard this conversation, would we be ending this show with you having something to ponder, to think about in terms of the word? Do you feel something different from the beginning versus the end of the show?
Most definitely. I felt something just definitely from the beginning of the show, even so of the introduction, because it gave me a lot of time to really think about what I really go into, thinking about this N-word. And it brings about a different way of looking at it, especially what's going on today. How it's like now, how can I be more corrective in the way I say things? Not just to my family, but everywhere. Don't get me wrong. I have that type of personality where I can go into the corporate world. You'll never hear it. You'll never know that I even say it. When I get home, different story. I'm hanging out with friends. But even in that, how can I transform that culture? Because I got youth that's involved. And you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm looking at when it comes down to the N-word now. Is to get my youth to understand that this is really not the way of communicating. You can't get anything across communicating using these words, because really in the public eye, in any type of corporate, you're not going to use it. Yeah.
Amanda, what do you think? Anything different, or well, you like a Shotgun.
I think it's important for people to understand that they should use their words. I'm a firm believer in using your words, learning, educating yourself, using your words, learning a lot of different words. You know, the N word is not the only word in the world. I think I don't have a problem hearing it unless it's from people I don't think should be saying it. But if it comes out sporadically in conversation, I don't have a problem with that. But it's important to use your words, you know, like if you can opt to saying the person's name, then you probably could. But, you know, if it comes out sporadically, I don't have a problem with that as well.
Okay. Dr. Lester, if as we wrap all of this amazing dialogue, you know, together, if there was one takeaway, you know, think in terms of the takeaways that you certainly want your students to have at the end of a course, what do you think might be a good takeaway from the conversation that we had here today?
Well, the focus on words and language, and that how language and words reflect or can reflect how we think, but language and words can also limit how we think. And I'm remembering that there's a student who has a degree from University of Wisconsin in hip hop, one of the first degrees in the country. And he wrote a poem, and I just want to, just a couple of the lines here. The name of it is Nigga, and it's 6-letter twin, and his name is Sean Medlin. And he says, "It's funny how America praises me and condemns me with the same word, Nigga. It's different from the 6-letter word twin, Nigger. That's how he starts it. And he ends it by saying, everyone I know wants to be black, but it's not cool to be greeted and hung with the same word."
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, folks, as much as I'm enjoying this, we have to wrap up the show. I want to thank my guest, Amanda Watson. Thank you so much, Michael Pinson and Dr. Lester. You know, it's been just an amazing conversation. I want to leave my viewers with a thought, and that thought is when you take control of your words, you take back your life. And I want that to be a closing thought. Thank you so much for watching Legitimate Matters. Remember, you can find us on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter and on YouTube. Don't you forget to subscribe. We thank you. We love you. Guys, you're the best. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.